Richard Mercer slowed his Tesla to a crawl, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the unfamiliar street signs. The GPS on his dashboard had led him into this part of Boston, a neighborhood that wasn't on his usual route between his downtown office and suburban mansion. A detour due to construction, the pleasant female voice had explained. Richard frowned. He preferred efficiency in all things. At 52, Richard had built Mercertech from nothing into a billion-dollar empire. His salt and pepper hair was precisely cut, his tailored suit immaculate. Even his posture behind the wheel was perfect, a habit from decades of boardroom dominance. Recalculating, the GPS announced, making Richard sigh. He was already running late for a dinner meeting with potential investors. His fingers drummed impatiently on the steering wheel as he approached a small, neglected park wedged between apartment buildings. That's when he saw them. Two children stood on a cracked sidewalk bordering the park. One, a boy of about 10, wore clothes that hung loosely on his thin frame. Jeans torn at the knees, a faded t-shirt despite the early March chill. The other child, younger and smaller, had a blindfold wrapped around his eyes. No, not a blindfold, Richard realized as he slowed further. Those were actual bandages. The older child was patiently guiding the smaller boy's hand, which gripped what looked like a broomstick handle with duct tape wrapped around one end. "That's it, Jamie," the older boy was saying. "Tap side to side like I showed you. Feel for the edge of the grass." Richard found himself pulling over without consciously deciding to do so. Through his open window, he watched as the older boy demonstrated again, moving the makeshift cane in a gentle arc. "I'm scared," the smaller boy, Jamie, said, his voice barely audible. "It's okay to be scared," the older boy replied, "but you're doing great. One more try, then we'll take a break." Something about the scene made Richard's chest tighten. He switched off the engine and stepped out of the car, ignoring his phone as it vibrated with another message, likely from the investors wondering where he was. As he approached, the older boy spotted him and stepped protectively closer to Jamie. "Hi there," Richard said, trying to sound casual. "What are you guys doing?" The older boy regarded him suspiciously. "I'm teaching Jamie how to use a cane." Jamie turned toward Richard's voice, and Richard realized with a shock that the bandages weren't temporary. The boy's eyes were damaged or missing entirely. "I'm blind," Jamie said matter-of-factly. "Not just playing. Alex is teaching me how to get around better." Richard nodded, then remembered Jamie couldn't see him. That's really impressive. Both of you." "It's not a big deal," Alex shrugged, but Richard could see pride flash across his face at the praise. "How old are you two?" Richard asked. "I'm almost 9, Jamie said. "Alex is 10. Richard glanced at Alex, noticing details he'd missed at first, the dirt under his fingernails, the way his cheekbones stood out too sharply on his young face. The boy looked undernourished. "Where are your parents?" Richard asked. "My dad drops me off here after school," Jamie explained. "He works 3 jobs. He'll pick me up at 6. "What about you?" Richard asked Alex, who shifted uncomfortably. "I stay with a foster family," Alex said, his eyes darting away. "They don't mind if I'm out during the day." Richard checked his watch. It was only 4:30. "Jamie, does your dad know you're here with just Alex? It'll be dark soon." Jamie nodded. "He knows Alex takes care of me. The after-school program got too expensive." Richard felt a strange mix of concern and admiration. These children had created their own support system out of necessity. "Would you like a ride home, Jamie?" Richard offered, then quickly added, "Alex could come too, to make sure you're comfortable." Both boys hesitated. "My dad says not to get in cars with strangers," Jamie said. "Smart rule," Richard agreed. "Why don't I wait with you until your dad comes then?" His dinner meeting was important. a potential $50 million investment deal, but suddenly it didn't seem urgent. Richard sent a brief text cancelling the meeting, ignoring the immediate response that popped up on his screen. They settled on a nearby bench, and Richard learned that Alex had been teaching Jamie to navigate for weeks. The boys had met 2 months ago in this park, and Alex had appointed himself Jamie's unofficial helper. "Alex knows everything," Jamie said admiringly. "He even figured out which buses go where without looking at the map." "I just pay attention," Alex murmured, embarrassed. As the evening grew cooler, Richard removed his cashmere coat and wrapped it around Jamie's shoulders. The boy's fingers traced the soft fabric with wonder. "It feels like a cloud," Jamie whispered. At precisely 6 p.m., a tired-looking man hurried into the park. He wore a janitor's uniform and carried a small paper bag. "Jamie," he called, then stopped short when he saw Richard. "Dad," Jamie waved in the direction of his father's voice. "This is Mr. Richard. He waited with us." The man approached cautiously, his eyes taking in Richard's expensive clothes, the Tesla parked nearby. "Michael Turner," he introduced himself, extending a hand that was rough with calluses. "Thank you for looking after my boy." Richard shook his hand, a strange feeling washing over him. There was something familiar about Michael Turner's face, the shape of his brow, the set of his jaw. "Richard Mercer," he replied automatically. Michael froze, his hand still gripping Richard's. The color drained from his face. "Rick," he whispered, using a nickname Richard hadn't heard in 15 years. And suddenly, Richard recognized him too. Michael Turner. Once Mike Turner, his business partner, when Mercer Tech was just 2 guys working out of a garage. The same Mike who'd opposed Richard's decision to pivot to military contracts. The same Mike whom Richard had maneuvered out of the company through a series of legal tactics just before their big break. "You two know each other?" Alex asked, looking between them. "We were business associates," Richard said carefully, "a long time ago." Michael had recovered his composure, though his jaw remained tight. "Very long ago." He turned to Jamie. "Come on, son. Time to go home." "Can Alex come for dinner?" Jamie asked. "Please?" Michael's expression softened as he looked at Alex. "Of course. We don't have much, but you're always welcome at our table." "You too, Mr. Richard," Jamie added innocently. The invitation hung in the air like a challenge. Richard saw Michael stiffen, though he didn't contradict his son. "Another time, perhaps," Richard said, suddenly eager to escape. "I should be going." He watched as Michael guided Jamie with practiced ease, one hand gently on his son's shoulder. Alex walked on Jamie's other side, still holding the makeshift cane. They made a strange little family, bound not by blood, but by necessity and kindness. Back in his car, Richard sat motionless, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The heat was on full blast, but he felt cold inside. In the rearview mirror, he could still see them walking away. Michael, the man whose dreams he'd crushed. Jamie, blind because of what? A condition? An accident? And Alex, a child who had nothing yet gave everything to help another. Richard's phone buzzed again. His ex-wife, reminding him that their daughter Chelsea would be staying with him this weekend. Information delivered with her typical coldness. Chelsea, 16 and increasingly distant, preferred her mother's house these days. Richard couldn't blame her. As he drove toward his empty 12,000 square foot home in Brookline, the contrast between his life and what he'd just witnessed became painfully clear. He had everything and nothing. They had nothing and everything. The realization sat like a stone in his stomach as he pulled into his circular driveway. For the first time in years, Richard Mercer questioned whether he had made the right choices. Richard sat in his home office, surrounded by awards and certificates that suddenly seemed meaningless. 3 days had passed since his encounter with Michael Turner and the two boys, but he couldn't shake the image of Jamie's blindness or Alex's quiet determination. With a few keystrokes, Richard accessed information that most people couldn't. His company had connections to every major hospital database in the country, officially for medical technology research, unofficially for Richard's personal use. He hesitated only briefly before typing James Turner and Boston into the search field. The results appeared quickly. Jamie Turner, age 8, diagnosed with progressive retinal deterioration at age 5. His mother, Sarah Turner, was battling stage 3 breast cancer, her treatments consuming whatever savings the family managed to gather. The database noted financial hardship and insurance limitations, besides several treatment options that had been discussed but not pursued. Richard closed his laptop and walked to the window overlooking his perfectly landscaped garden. Spring was trying to break through the last chill of winter, with small buds appearing on the trees. His groundskeeper would ensure everything bloomed perfectly in its time. His phone rang. His daughter, Chelsea. "Dad," she said without greeting when he answered. "Mum says I need to remind you about the science fair at school tomorrow." "I remembered," Richard lied. "I've got it on my calendar." "Whatever," Chelsea replied. "Just be there. My project is at 2 p.m. Before he could respond, she had hung up. Richard stared at the phone, wondering when their relationship had become so transactional. Chelsea had been 10 when the divorce happened, still young enough to adore her father despite his constant absences. Now at 16, she had her mother's sharpness and none of her former warmth. The next day, Richard sat uncomfortably in the high school gymnasium, surrounded by parents who seemed to know each other. Chelsea's project, an impressive analysis of cryptocurrency fluctuations, won first place, but her smile was directed at her friends, not at him. "Good job," he said afterward, awkwardly patting her shoulder. "Thanks for coming," she replied, already looking past him to where her friends waited. "I'm going to hang out with Madison and Zoe. Mum said it's fine." "What about our dinner plans?" Richard asked, trying to hide his disappointment. "Can we reschedule? Madison's parents got tickets to a concert." Richard nodded, knowing he should insist on their time together, but lacking the energy for the argument that would follow. "Sure. Have fun." After Chelsea left, Richard wandered through the remaining science fair displays. He stopped at one that featured eye anatomy, drawn to it because of Jamie. A boy with thick glasses was explaining retinal structure to an elderly couple. "The retina is amazing," the boy was saying. "It converts light into neural signals, but there are hundreds of genetic conditions that can damage it." "Any treatments?" the old man asked. "Some experimental ones," the boy replied. "Dr. Patel at Boston Children's is doing incredible work with gene therapy. Her team is running clinical trials right now." Richard made a mental note of the name before heading to his car. On impulse, instead of driving home, he found himself back in the neighborhood where he'd met Jamie and Alex. The small park was empty today, except for a few toddlers with their mothers. Richard parked and walked the neighborhood, noting the run-down apartment buildings and small businesses struggling to stay open. He stopped at a community center with a peeling sign that read, "Dorchester Youth Programs." Inside, a middle-aged woman looked up from the front desk. "Can I help you?" "I'm just looking around," Richard said. "Do you offer programs for children with disabilities?" "We try," she said with a tired smile. "Budget cuts hit us hard last year, but we still run a special needs group on Tuesdays and Thursdays." "What about visually impaired children?" The woman's face brightened. "Are you asking about Jamie?" Sweet boy. He comes when his dad can bring him, but that's not often these days with Mrs. Turner's condition. Richard nodded, not correcting her assumption. What kinds of resources do you offer for kids like him? Not enough, she admitted. We lost our vision specialist when the funding was cut. The closest special services are downtown, but transportation is an issue for many families. Richard thanked her and left, his mind racing with possibilities. Back in his car, he made 2 calls, one to Dr. Patel's office at Boston Children's Hospital, requesting information about her clinical trials, and another to his lawyer. I want to set up a new foundation, he told the lawyer, anonymously, focus on medical treatments for children and community programs in Dorchester. The lawyer was used to Richard's impulsive projects. I'll draw up the paperwork. Any particular name for this one? Richard thought of Alex's makeshift cane guiding Jamie through the park. Second Sight Foundation, he decided. That weekend, Chelsea stayed with him as scheduled, though she spent most of her time in her room video chatting with friends. On Sunday morning, Richard suggested they volunteer at a community kitchen downtown. Why? Chelsea asked suspiciously. I thought it might be good for us, Richard said. Do something different together. Chelsea rolled her eyes but agreed, clearly expecting to hate the experience. At the kitchen, they were assigned to work with a grey-haired woman named Gladys, who showed them how to prepare sandwiches for the lunch line. First time volunteering? Gladys asked, expertly spreading mayo on bread slices. Yes, Richard admitted. Rich people guilt or court-ordered community service? She asked bluntly. Chelsea snorted with unexpected laughter, and Richard felt his face grow warm. The first one, I guess. Gladys nodded. Well, at least you're honest. Now make yourself useful and slice these tomatoes. By noon, the kitchen was filled with people lining up for food. Richard and Chelsea worked side by side, serving soup and sandwiches. Richard was placing a bread roll on a tray when he heard a familiar voice. Thank you. He looked up to see Alex, the boy from the park, standing across the counter. Alex didn't immediately recognize Richard in his apron and hairnet, but then his eyes widened. You're Jamie's friend, Richard said quickly. Alex, right? Alex nodded cautiously. Why are you here? Volunteering, Richard said. This is my daughter, Chelsea. Chelsea gave a small wave, studying Alex with curiosity. Is Jamie here too? Richard asked, trying to sound casual while scanning the line. No, Alex said. His mum's not feeling well today, so he's home with her. Richard added extra cookies to Alex's tray. How is she doing? Alex lowered his voice. Not good. Mr. Turner is working all the time to pay for her medicine, and Jamie gets scared when he's alone with her because sometimes she doesn't answer when he talks to her. Richard felt a knot form in his stomach. That must be hard for everyone. Yeah, Alex agreed, moving down the line. Thanks for the cookies. After the shift ended, Chelsea was unusually quiet on the drive home. Finally, she asked, Who's Jamie? Richard explained about meeting the boys in the park, leaving out the part about Michael being his former business partner. That kid Alex doesn't look good, Chelsea observed. Too skinny. I noticed that too. Are you going to do something about it? She asked. The question surprised Richard. What do you mean? Chelsea shrugged. You always say throwing money at problems solves them. So, are you going to help those boys or just feel bad about them? Her words stung with truth. I've started a foundation, he admitted, to help kids like Jamie access better medical care. What about Alex? I don't know yet, Richard said honestly. His situation is complicated. Chelsea nodded, looking out the window. At least you're trying, she said quietly, the first hint of approval she'd offered him in months. The next week, Richard received 2 pieces of news. First, Dr. Patel had agreed to evaluate Jamie for her clinical trial, with all costs covered by an anonymous donor. Second, his private investigator had located Alex's foster home, a crowded house in Roxbury with 6 other children and a foster mother who collected checks while providing minimal care. Richard sat in his car outside the foster home, watching as Alex trudged up the steps after school. The boy's shoulders were hunched, his expression changing from open to guarded as he approached the door. As April's warmth began to replace March's chill, Richard realized he was becoming involved in ways he hadn't planned. His carefully structured life was shifting, priorities rearranging themselves without his permission. For the first time in years, he found himself thinking about someone other than himself. He started his car, decision made. It was time to face Michael Turner properly, not as a chance encounter, but as a man ready to acknowledge the past and perhaps find a way forward. Richard had rehearsed this moment a dozen times in his mind, but now that he stood outside the Turners' apartment building, his carefully prepared speech felt inadequate. The building was clean but worn, with faded paint and a security door that didn't fully close. He checked the address again, Unit 4B, and took the stairs because the elevator had an out-of-order sign taped to it. On the 4th floor, he hesitated before knocking on the door marked 4B. A woman answered, thin and pale, with a colourful scarf wrapped around her head. Despite her obvious illness, Sarah Turner's eyes were kind and alert. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for Michael Turner," Richard said, his mouth suddenly dry. "He's at work," she replied. "Should be home in about an hour if you'd like to leave a message." From inside the apartment, a familiar voice called out. "Mom, who is it?" "Someone looking for your father, Jamie," she called back, then turned to Richard. "I'm sorry, you are?" "Richard Mercer, an old colleague of Michael's." Sarah's expression changed instantly, recognition and then wariness crossing her face. "I see," she said quietly. "Michael has mentioned you." Before Richard could respond, Jamie appeared beside his mother, his hand finding her arm with practiced ease. "Mr. Richard, is that you? I recognize your voice." "Hello, Jamie," Richard said, touched that the boy remembered him. "Mum, this is the man who waited with me and Alex at the park," Jamie explained. "He was nice." Sarah looked surprised. "You've met my son?" "By chance," Richard explained. "I was driving through the neighborhood." Jamie tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Can Mr. Richard come in, please?" Sarah hesitated, studying Richard's face. Whatever she was looking for, she seemed to find it because she stepped back. "I suppose that would be all right. Michael should be home soon." The apartment was small, but spotlessly clean. Family photos covered one wall. Jamie as a toddler with perfect sight, Michael looking younger and happier, Sarah before illness had taken its toll. A small table was covered with pill bottles and medical paperwork. "Jamie, why don't you get your book and read in your room?" Sarah suggested. "Mr. Mercer and I need to talk." "But Mom—" "Please, honey." Jamie sighed but obeyed, feeling his way down a short hallway to his room. "He's gotten good at navigating," Richard observed. "He's adapted well," Sarah agreed, gesturing for Richard to sit at their small kitchen table. "Now why are you here, Mr. Mercer? After 15 years of silence?" Richard had expected anger, but found something more unsettling. Quiet dignity in the face of suffering he had partially caused. "I wanted to apologize to Michael," he said simply. "What I did was wrong." Sarah studied him. "Yes, it was. Do you know what happened after you forced him out of the company?" Richard shook his head. Michael had to start over completely. The non-compete agreement meant he couldn't work in tech for 3 years. He took night classes in accounting while working construction during the day. We were doing okay until Jamie's diagnosis and then my cancer. Richard looked down at his hands. "I didn't know." Of course not. Why would you? Sarah's voice was tired rather than bitter. You were busy becoming a billionaire. Before Richard could respond, the front door opened, and Michael walked in, still wearing his security guard uniform. He froze when he saw Richard. What are you doing in my home? Michael asked, his voice tight. He came to apologize, Sarah explained, rising to kiss her husband's cheek. Michael set down his lunch bag. After 15 years, why now? Meeting Jamie and Alex at the park. It made me realize some things, Richard admitted, about the kind of person I've become. Michael's laugh was harsh. So my blind son made you see? That's ironic. Michael, Sarah said softly, touching his arm. Michael took a deep breath. Sarah, could you give us a few minutes? After she left, Michael sat across from Richard. Let me guess. You're here to ease your conscience with an apology and maybe offer some money. The apology, yes, Richard said. As for money, I've already arranged for Jamie to be evaluated by Dr. Patel at Boston Children's Hospital. Her gene therapy trial has shown promising results for his condition. Michael stiffened. We didn't ask for your charity. It's not charity, Richard insisted. It's the least I can do. You should have received a portion of Mercatech's success. We built the foundation together. Until you decided I was in your way, Michael said bluntly. Richard didn't deny it. I was ruthless, driven. I told myself that's what successful people do. Eliminate obstacles. He met Michael's gaze directly. I was wrong. Michael studied him for a long moment. Jamie's appointment with Dr. Patel, is that why we received a call from her office? They said a spot had opened up in their trial. Richard nodded. I made sure his case was prioritized. And the anonymous donation to cover Sarah's new treatment option? Also me, Richard admitted, through a foundation I created. Michael leaned back, conflict clear on his face. Do you expect gratitude or forgiveness? Neither, Richard said honestly. I just want to help fix what I broke. A knock at the door interrupted them. Michael answered it to find Alex standing in the hallway, his clothes dirty, a fresh bruise darkening his cheek. Alex, what happened? Michael asked, guiding the boy inside. Nothing, Alex mumbled. Just some kids. Is Jamie here? Richard stood, alarmed by Alex's appearance. The boy looked worse than when he'd seen him at the community kitchen. Did your foster mother see you leave? Michael asked gently. Alex shrugged. She doesn't care. Can I stay for dinner? Of course, Michael said without hesitation. Go wash up and I'll call Jamie. After Alex disappeared into the bathroom, Michael turned to Richard. That boy has it worse than us. His foster mother takes in kids for the checks but barely feeds them. I know, Richard said. I had someone look into his situation. Michael raised an eyebrow. You've been busy. I'm trying to arrange a better placement for him, but the system is complicated. Michael nodded. Meanwhile, he comes here whenever he can. Sarah always makes extra food, even when we barely have enough. The rest of the evening unfolded in a way Richard could never have anticipated. He stayed for dinner at Jamie's insistence, watching as the Turner family included Alex in their modest meal and easy conversation. Despite their challenges, there was laughter and warmth around their table, things his expensive dining room had never known. When Alex described a particularly difficult teacher, Chelsea's name came up unexpectedly. She volunteers at our community center now, Alex explained. She's nice, helps with homework on Thursdays. Richard nearly dropped his fork. Chelsea? My daughter? Alex nodded. She said her dad made her volunteer at first, but now she likes it. Richard was stunned. Chelsea hadn't mentioned continuing to volunteer after their one visit to the community kitchen. After dinner, as Richard prepared to leave, Jamie asked if he could feel Richard's face. "I like to know what people look like," he explained. Richard knelt down, and Jamie's small fingers gently traced his features, the lines around his eyes, the shape of his nose, the set of his jaw. "You feel sad," Jamie concluded. "Sometimes," Richard admitted, "but less sad now." Richard smiled, knowing Jamie could feel the change under his fingertips. "Yes, less sad now." Outside the apartment, Michael walked Richard to his car. The night air was cool, with spring finally taking hold. "I still don't know if I can forgive you," Michael said frankly, "but Jamie's appointment with Dr. Patel is next week, and I won't let my pride stand in the way of helping my son." "I understand," Richard said, "and for what it's worth, you've built something more valuable than I ever did. A family living paycheck to paycheck." "A real family," Richard clarified. "One that takes in strays like Alex and makes room at the table even when there's barely enough." Michael was quiet for a moment. "We do what we can. And speaking of Alex, if you're serious about helping him—" "I am," Richard assured him. "Then you should know he's brilliant with numbers. Maybe the smartest kid I've ever met. But his foster situation—" Michael trailed off, shaking his head. "I'll look into it," Richard promised. "And Michael, thank you for not turning me away tonight." Michael's reply was simple. "We don't turn people away. That's the difference between us." As Richard drove home to his empty mansion, those words echoed in his mind. He had spent a lifetime accumulating wealth and power. But somewhere along the way, he had lost the ability to connect with others, even his own daughter. His phone buzzed with a text from Chelsea. "Community Centre needs volunteers for Saturday field trip. Want to come?" Richard smiled, tapping out his reply, "I'll be there." For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, not just for Jamie and Alex, but for himself as well. 2 months had passed since Richard first encountered Jamie and Alex in the park. Spring had fully blossomed into early summer, bringing longer days and warmth to Boston. In that time, more had changed in Richard's life than in the previous 15 years combined. He pulled into the parking lot of Boston Children's Hospital, where Jamie was receiving his 3rd treatment in Dr. Patel's gene therapy trial. The first 2 treatments had already shown promising results. Jamie had started to perceive light and shadows, a development that the medical team called cautiously encouraging. Inside the hospital's bright lobby, Richard spotted Chelsea sitting with Alex, both of them hunched over a math workbook. His daughter looked up and waved him over. "Dad, Alex just solved a calculus problem I've been stuck on for days," Chelsea said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. Alex ducked his head, embarrassed by the praise. "It's just numbers. They make sense to me." In the weeks since their first dinner at the Turners, Richard had become increasingly involved in Alex's life. After documenting the neglect at his foster home, Richard had worked with social services to have Alex temporarily placed with a vetted family who lived near the Turners. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was safer than where he had been. "Michael and Sarah are upstairs with Jamie," Chelsea explained. "Mum's waiting too." That was another unexpected development. Richard's ex-wife, Linda, had initially been skeptical about his sudden interest in charity cases, as she called them. But after meeting Jamie and seeing Chelsea's growing involvement with the community centre, she had softened. Today marked the first time she had agreed to join them at the hospital. "How's Jamie doing?" Richard asked, as they headed toward the elevators. "Scared but trying not to show it," Alex replied. "He says the lights hurt sometimes, but Dr. Patel says that's actually good. It means his retinal cells are responding." The elevator doors opened to reveal the pediatric floor, decorated with colorful murals. They found the waiting area where Linda sat, thumbing through a magazine. She nodded at Richard, their relationship still cool but no longer frozen. "Chelsea's been showing me the outreach program she's designing," Linda said. "For visually impaired children, it's quite impressive." Chelsea shrugged, but Richard could see she was pleased. "It's just an idea. The community centre needs more specialised programs. An idea that the Second Sight Foundation is very interested in funding," Richard added. He had been open with Chelsea about his connection to the foundation, though the arrangement remained anonymous to everyone else. The treatment room door opened, and Dr. Patel emerged with Jamie, followed by Michael and Sarah. Jamie wore special dark glasses, but his steps seemed more confident than before. "I saw the outline of the big machine," Jamie announced excitedly, "like a shadow, but I knew what it was." The adults exchanged meaningful looks over his head while Alex high-fived his friend. "The results continue to be promising," Dr. Patel told them. "Jamie's retinal response is exceeding our expectations. With continued treatments, there's real potential for partial vision restoration." Sarah, looking stronger after her own new treatment protocol, wiped tears from her eyes. "We can't thank you enough for including Jamie in the trial." "He's an ideal candidate," Dr. Patel replied simply. "Now remember, keep those special glasses on in bright light, Jamie. Your eyes are working in new ways, and they need protection." As they prepared to leave, Linda surprised everyone by inviting the Turner family to a small celebration at her house. "Nothing fancy," she added, seeing Michael's hesitation. "Just pizza and ice cream to celebrate Jamie's progress." In the parking lot, they divided into cars, Linda taking Chelsea and Alex, while Richard drove the Turners. As they settled into his car, Jamie reached forward from the back seat and patted Richard's shoulder. "Your car smells like leather," he observed, "and something else." "Probably success," Michael said with only a hint of bitterness. "No," Jamie decided. "More like someone who doesn't use their car enough. It smells new still." Richard laughed, surprised by the boy's perception. "You're right. I don't drive much except to work and back." "You should go more places," Jamie advised seriously. "Alex says there's a whole city out there." "Wise words," Sarah agreed, squeezing her son's hand. At Linda's house, a tasteful but modest home compared to Richard's mansion, they gathered around the patio table. Chelsea and Alex set up a simple math game for Jamie that helped him practice using his emerging vision, while the adults prepared food. Richard found himself working alongside Michael at the grill, an unexpected domestic scene that would have seemed impossible months ago. "I found something yesterday," Michael said quietly, flipping a burger. "Thought you might want to see it." He pulled a creased photo from his wallet and handed it to Richard. It showed the two of them 15 years younger, standing in front of their first office, a converted garage with a hand-painted Mercatech sign. "You kept this?" Richard asked, surprised. Michael nodded. "I used to look at it when I was angry, to fuel the resentment. Then later, to remind myself of what I'd lost." He paused. "Jamie found it once and asked who you were. I told him you were someone I used to know, someone smart and ambitious. You didn't tell him what I did to you. What would be the point?" Michael shrugged. "Besides, Jamie has this way of seeing the good in people. He gets that from Sarah." Inside the house, Linda was showing Sarah a photo album. Richard heard his ex-wife laugh, a sound he had almost forgotten. "She's different with them," Michael observed, following Richard's gaze. "Less guarded." "We all are," Richard admitted. After dinner, while the children played a board game with raised pieces that Jamie could feel, Richard received an urgent call. He stepped away to take it. "Mr. Mercer, this is Diane from Social Services," a woman's voice said. "We have a situation with Alex." Richard tensed. What's happened? His foster placement is being terminated. The family is relocating unexpectedly for work. We need to move him by the end of the week. Options? Richard asked, watching Alex laugh with Chelsea across the yard. Limited, I'm afraid. The group home in Roxbury has space, but given his history there... No, Richard said firmly. Not acceptable. I understand your concern, but I want to apply to become his foster parent, Richard said, the words surprising even himself. There was silence on the line. That's unexpected, Mr. Mercer. The process typically takes months. Expedite it, Richard said. Check my background, inspect my home, whatever you need. But Alex deserves stability. After ending the call, Richard stood watching the scene before him. Michael and Sarah sat close together, her head on his shoulder as they watched their son play. Linda was showing Chelsea and Alex how to make ice cream sundaes. It was a simple family gathering, the kind Richard had never prioritized during his rise to wealth and power. He approached the group, clearing his throat. Alex, could I speak with you for a minute? The boy followed him to a quiet corner of the yard, his expression guarded. Despite weeks of building trust, Alex still expected disappointment from adults. Your current foster family is moving away, Richard began gently. Alex's face fell. I know. They told me yesterday. Why didn't you say anything? The boy shrugged. It's normal. I never stay anywhere long. Richard knelt to meet Alex's eyes. How would you feel about staying with me at my house? I have plenty of room, and you could still see Jamie and the Turners regularly. Alex stared at him. You want to foster me? Why? It was a fair question, one that Richard had been asking himself since making the impulsive offer. Because you deserve a chance, he said simply, and maybe I need one too. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, Richard found himself sitting beside Michael on the porch steps. The summer twilight stretched long across the sky, neither day nor night. I heard what you offered Alex, Michael said. Richard nodded. It'll be complicated. I'll need to make changes. Complicated is normal for families, Michael replied. The question is whether you're ready for it. I don't know, Richard admitted, but I want to try. Michael was quiet for a moment. You know, the night we first saw you again, when you waited with Jamie at the park, he asked me later why my heart was beating so fast when I recognized you. What did you tell him? That sometimes people from our past remind us of who we used to be. Michael looked at Richard directly. I think I'm finally ready to let go of that anger. Not for your sake, but for mine. And for Jamie. Inside the house, they could hear Chelsea explaining something to Alex and Jamie, her voice animated. Linda's laughter joined in, followed by Sarah's. They're going to be fine, aren't they? Richard said, looking toward the warm light spilling from the windows. Better than fine, Michael agreed. They're going to be extraordinary. As Richard drove home that night, to the mansion that suddenly seemed too large and too empty, he thought about the changes coming. Alex would need a room prepared. The social workers would have questions. Chelsea had already texted, asking if she could help Alex decorate his new space. And beyond the practical concerns, there were deeper questions about what kind of guardian he could be to a boy who had seen the harshest sides of life. But for the first time in years, Richard felt truly alive, connected to something larger than his own success. The path forward wasn't clear, but it was real, with all the messiness and uncertainty that came with genuine human connection. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Jamie, smiling broadly as he held up a drawing of what appeared to be people standing in sunshine. Below it, in careful handwriting, Jamie wanted to send this. He says it's all of us. He saw the colors today. Sarah. Richard felt something catch in his throat as he saved the image. The drawing showed simple figures holding hands, a family circle that now somehow included him too.